Media Essential Workers, thank you for joining us on a Friday night. We're excited, very excited to bring who I consider one of the original mentors I've had at NBC joining us today, and that is Jim McDonald, although I call him, and I think most of us know you as Jimmy Mac, plain and simple. Jimmy Mac, I'm going to ask you, what brings you on here today? Because you've got a lot to talk about. You've got a lot of experience. Show some of the props that you brought on, because again, you again.
Well, we're on the air, so I might as well, we'll get that going. I've got a lot of microphones and audio equipment, but I was able to get out of, lucky to get out of NBC Tower with this piece of equipment here.
Security's still looking for that.
They're still looking for it. And when I put it on my shoulder, I can't believe that guys actually carried these things around. What the shoulder problems and back problems must have been. I said, this camera alone weighs more than the M2 or the DVC Pro cameras that we use. So I'm putting it down before it'll call for a trip to the emergency room, and I don't need that. But
now what was that somewhat antique piece of equipment that you had there? Was that was Betacam, or was that even earlier?
It's just a camera only.
Okay.
It's an RCA TK76.
Wow.
It was one of the first. There were a few before it that came before it, but when that camera came out, it just made absolutely beautiful, gorgeous pictures. Just really, really remarkable pictures. And WMAQ had a number of them. I forget, maybe 14 or 15 of them. And every night, we had an engineer, his name was L. Owens, that tweaked them every day. So every camera was up to snuff. They were all equal. So if you had a camera crew on the south side of Chicago and one on the north side, and they were shooting separate elements, the video would match. On the front of the tape machines that we had,
so that camera is a lot like a passport as far as I'm concerned. It's allowed us to kind of see and be front row to a lot of history-making events. You have, quite honestly, probably seen a lot of this as it's unfolded. You've spent some time in local news, also on the network level, got your start in audio. Let's talk about what really motivated you. You said as a young child, your dad was a linesman and electrician with IBW, I'm assuming?
Yes, correct. Local number 9.
Local number 9. And he brought home a speaker and a microphone. He knew that was your interest. Tell me what a young Jimmy Mac, flash that picture up of our young Jimmy Mac friend. Tell us what inspired a young Jimmy Mac to be like, hey, you know what? I want to get into audio. Audio is something that intrigues me, entices me. This is going to be probably my career.
Well, it basically was like in 4th, 5th grade. And my dad somehow found a microphone stand and a microphone. And then the next, we've got an old speaker from a television set and an amplifier, and we started playing around with that. No, this works. No, that doesn't work. But then in grade school, it was the same thing. 5th grade, at our Lady of Peace school out on the 79th and Jeffrey, the nuns they're having an assembly down in the assembly hall. Oh, go get the McDonald kid. He's the only one that knows how to turn on the PA system and set up the microphone. Okay, so the nuns were, they knew I knew how to get the system up and running. And it was the same thing with the system.
You also knew how to give the nuns a little bit of a scare, right? When you start tuning some of that shortwave radio. That was kind of
at the science fair, I brought in, my dad had purchased a Hallicrafters S108 receiver, and I still own it today. And other kids had little projects, but I had set up the Hallicrafters shortwave radio, and I got bell wire, and we strung it, down in the basement. And I turned it on, and it was all tubes, and it took a few minutes for it to warm up. And I'm going up and down the dial, and the first station I pull in, it's a foreign language station. Of course, I didn't know what I was listening to, but the nuns came over and understood that it was Russian, and it was Radio Moscow that we were listening to. And in 1963-64, that was not the thing for young kids in Chicago to be listening to. So I had to tune down the dial But I went down the dial to the left, and okay, here's another foreign language station. It was in Spanish, and then they got all upset because it was Radio Havana. So get something else on that. So I just tuned it to WLS and put on. I think it was a little bit of rock and roll that they had on at that time, and I left it at that. But I could still explain how, the basics on how radio was working. So
I can't imagine they'd be thrilled about the rock and roll, but I think it was better than the other two alternatives you presented to them.
Yes, the smart Alec McDonald kid out there putting on Radio Moscow and Radio Havana, that didn't go over very well with the Dominicans,
So you at this time realized that this was kind of something that you wanted to do. You were very passionate about audio. You were very passionate about radio. Was it radio or was it always television that fascinated you? And kind of tell us how you progressed into actually becoming an audio engineer.
It was a combination of both, and giving my friends a hand with their backyard garage rock and roll band, setting up the PA system, very crude equipment at the time. And when I did get into high school, I went to South Shore for 2 years and St. Francis de Sales for 2 years. I got on the stage crew that did the lighting, set up the microphones, operate the spotlights. But they also had an audio-visual crew at South Shore where you would bring a projector in or a record player or a slide projector or a tape recorder when teachers had a presentation that they needed. So I was always working with the equipment back in high school. And little did I know at the time at South Shore High School that I would be working with, at high school with three of my future cohorts and at WMAQ TV. I had a good friend, Glenn Hannigan, who helped me get my job at WMAQ. Dave Antler, another great friend, a great mentor, went out of high school and started working in the recording industry in Chicago. And still to this day, probably has the best set of ears of anybody that I know in the city of Chicago. And Preston Yarber. Preston Yarber was sort of like the head of the audiovisual crews. And it's sort of strange to say, a couple of times there, all four of us worked on the same shows. Preston Yarber was the show director. Dave Antler was the technical director on the show. And Glenn Hannigan was on camera, and I was on audio. So there were four alumni from South Shore High School putting on their newscast every day. And that was sort of interesting. And, Preston is no longer with us, but Dave and Glenn, they're still very, very good friends of mine. Dave, I would call him up. He had been out of the industry for years. And I called him up and I said, I've got a job coming up where I need to know how to mic a cello. We've got cellos, a string section. What's a good microphone for a cello? How do I go about miking the cello? And his advice was just right on, spot on. It just, everything turned out just perfect. And I still, when I have questions, and I talk to him on my amateur radio today. I still have my amateur radio license, which is W9MAQ, which is interesting. A lot of people ask me, hey, were you in radio or television? I said, yeah, for 38 years. So it's interesting, how things get tied together, and you never know, what's the future, who you're going to be working with, 20, 30 years from now, or when you get out of high school.
I actually want to talk about this a little bit because we've talked about the production and what's gotten you interested. This show has always been about kind of motivating people and passing on the legacies of what people like yourself have done and helping motivate our younger generation. And what we all had in common was our love of news and getting information out there, getting public service out there. And one of the things that you told me about that I had no idea, and I Googled it after you told me, was just fascinating. Again, with these production skills, with these technologies, we're able to tell stories. We're able to tell fascinating stories that really get people to effectuate change. One such story was that of Mirage Tavern. I remember that was something that you kind of watched before you got into the industry. Tell us about that. I mean, Chicago's always been known as a place that has had some of its share of corruption. Mirage Tavern kind of proved that. Tell us what it did and what changes came out of it.
the Mirage Tavern was located at Superior and Wells in Chicago. And the Chicago Sun-Times, this is basically their story. But once it broke, everybody was reporting it. And the Mirage Tavern, the Sun-Times and the reporters, their investigative unit, had heard that, okay, there's a problem with building inspectors, electrical inspectors, all the different trades, plumbing, to open up a business. Everything, health inspectors, everything has to be on the up and up so people don't get sick or electrocuted. And when that story broke and they were showing how much money was exchanging hands and being traded, it was the story. And by the time I got into the broadcast industry, the story was still, it still was up there. They were still reporting on it every day.
Jimmy Mack, let's set the stage for people so they understand. So they had this tavern that they set up, and I believe the Sun-Times bought it. They actually bought this tavern and made it like a tavern that was under construction where work needed to be done. They stationed or perched two Sun-Times photographers, if I'm not mistaken, on kind of a makeshift perch, what would have been the second floor, kind of documenting and taking pictures of what was going on here. What they came to find was, and document was, they were able to take pictures of these guys. What would you call these permit compliance officer inspectors? Taking bribes to be like, you know what, this piping looks like it has a problem. Well, here's the money. It's fine. Let's move on. And this was all documented. And this was a media outlet that basically caught them in the act. And this is
absolutely caught them in the act. And then after the story broke, well, okay, the Sun-Times was not in the bar business, and they ended up selling the bar, but it was a hot story for quite a while there, I'm not sure if it's sort of hard to remember back then, but I imagine every television station, they did their, follow-ups on it or try to get other information on it. But it later turned into a sort of like a media hotspot. Another owner came in there. Yeah. And it would be the place after the 10 o'clock news, or, you could always find some journalist in there, camera people, engineering, you name it. And the front door was always open. And one night, well, here comes our good friend Jerry Taft on his Harley Davidson, and he rolls right into the bar on his bike, So, it gets tied in. There's so many people that we knew and that I worked with. Okay. And during the NABIT strike in 1987, well, we sort of used it as a headquarters. So we'd sit there and watch the 10 o'clock news.
No kidding.
And then listen to the wireless PL, the battery that the floor director was using, so we could hear what was going on the air, and then hearing all the behind the scenes over the PL that they didn't know was still being transmitted out there. So that was interesting entertainment for the people coming in the bar. They'd sit there, watch the TV set, and then also hear all the, the different goings on to trying to put the show on the air when all the NABIT workers were out on strike. So, that was an interesting building that, and I think it's still open today. I'm not sure what the name of the bar is, but it's still there today.
Wow. So, I mean, I grew up in Boston. We had the Boston Globe that broke more than its share of news. You remember this? And thank you, actually, Jane Nix. She's saying that this happened in 1977. Shortly thereafter, it came under new ownership. I didn't know it became a media hotspot. So I guess it would kind of be like Billy Goat Tavern is now the place known for journalists to kind of hang their hat and wait until something happens or just meet up afterwards. But man, see, these are the kind of the legacies that only by talking to you would I've even known that this was something that happened. You guys spent a fair amount of time there during the NABIT strike. Tell me what that was like. Tell me the year and what transpired there.
Well, the NABIT strike came along after General Electric came in and bought NBC, and it was General Electric's way or the highway. I'm not sure. The negotiations went on and on and on and on. and the strike lasted for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it was rough for both sides. A lot of people that had houses, homes, families, it was rough for them. But there were a group of us that weren't married, didn't have any children. Okay, we would take, picketing and different responsibilities there so that other folks could, get a job somewhere and support themselves during the strike. And everybody was quite happy when it was over. It was quite a scene coming back into the minicam shop at the Merchandise Mart, the day when we returned. It was, it looked like a hurricane had gone through there. It was something else. And well, I don't want to offend anybody. That's years ago, 1987 to now. It's been quite a while. And I hope nobody coming up in the industry ever has to go through anything like that again. It's always better to negotiate. You play the inside game. There's plenty of ways of getting your point across, I think, besides going out on strike.
So again, this is something that I want to talk about because in telling our younger generation about some of the television's growth and the industry's change, NBC Tower, that's where we're located now. You guys were back in the Merchandise Mart on a couple different floors, right? Tell us about that experience. And as I understand it, the guys in Minicam, when we refer to that, are the people who are out there, the photographers who you see in the field. They were stationed on the first floor, right? I mean, they kind of hung out there. Kind of tell me what that experience was like. Walk us through that for the people who never got to experience that. Tell us about your fond memories there, not fond memories. Give us the experience.
Well, at the Merchandise Mart, when I finally moved downstairs into Minicam, it was at the far east end of the Merchandise Mart, basically at ground level, at the end of the loading dock. And to get in and out of the Merchandise Mart, like say on a breaking story, when you've got 35, 45 semi-trailers trying to back in or pull out of the Merchandise Mart, on certain stories, that really became a sort of a problem. And especially certain times of the year, the Merchandise Mart would have different shows, carpeting and housewares and you name it, anything, the merchandise. And thousands of people would come and stay in the hotels, and they would be in the lobby going up to the different floors on the elevators. Well, trying to get to the 19th floor with videotape to be edited, sometimes that turned into a major nightmare for NBC. Made them think twice about why they were up on the 19th floor. Reporters trying to get down to the first floor to meet the crews either in front of the building or to meet up with a courier to be brought out to a story. And during the days where they had these shows, that turned out to be a lot of headaches. But they battled their way through it. We've got the job done. The story always got on the air. And, they always planned for it. Okay, NeoCon is coming to the Merchandise Mart. We better get our camera crews, get them out on the street, so that in case something does come up, okay, you can get out to take care of the story. But yeah, the Merchandise Mart, one of the largest buildings I think I had ever been in. There was banking and Walgreens and newspaper stands and some stores, some retail on the first floor. Second floor, a little bit more food, a shoe repair, men's clothing, women's clothing. And it really, it doesn't even slightly resemble what it's like today. Today that the building, the millions and millions that they have invested in the Merchandise Mart, it's absolutely beautiful. I have not been up to the 19th floor. That NBC basically had the entire 19th floor, and then there were executive offices up on the 20th floor. But,
Jimmy, I got to stop you here because there's something that popped up that I'm very curious about. Gordon McDonald says, tell me about the car fire. That sounds fascinating. That sounds like something that I want to hear about. And I want to actually state what Bud says, that eventually you guys had a dedicated elevator going up from the first floor to the 19th floor, competing with all these other businesses. I can tell probably slowed down progress. So, Bud, thanks for pointing out that eventually NBC management, NBC ownership decided Let's get a tower. Let's get an elevator so we can go up and down. Tell me about that car fire.
Well, the car fire. Well, the elevators, they had elevator starters. They were in uniforms and quite, they looked like they were military, and they were running the elevators. You tell them, 19th floor, please. And that's what NBC finally had to do that. And Gordon McDonald, my cousin, another good friend, amateur radio operator and a fellow electrician, the car fire, I would park my car across the street in the apparel center. It was down on the first floor. And one day, someone came into the minicam shop and says, "Yeah, who's got NBC on their license plates?" And I said, "Well, I do." He said, "Well, your car's on fire across the street at the in the apparel center." And I'm like, "What?" And I go running out of the building. And another good friend of mine who's retiring today, as a matter of fact, Mr. Paul Nagaro, he got in his car and they went over there with the camera equipment, and here my car, along with 4 or 5 other cars, up it was going. And it turned out there was an older lady that was driving one of these huge Cadillacs, and she was a smoker. And she thought she threw the cigarette out the window, but actually it went into the back seat of her car. And as she's going through the garage, the thing's on fire. And where did she decide to park her car? Right next to mine.
So Misery Love Company and 4 cars joined her in this.
It was a mess.
Inferno.
It was the noontime entertainment for everybody out there eating lunch. It was during the summer. And I said, geez, wow, I didn't plan on getting a new car, but, I ended up having to get one. That was a rough story there. Oh boy, Gordon, thanks for reminding me of that.
Hey, Jimmy Mack, you eventually got the car repaired, got another car, correct?
I got another car. That one was completely totaled along with all the other ones down there. It was
do me a favor. Something. Hold up that other sign. Hold up that other sign you got there.
What? This one here?
You got another car, ladies and gentlemen. That's the one. That is the one. And actually, while we're digressing a little, Bud, thank you for sharing that story with us. Obviously, you're watching this. We want you on the show as well. So please, Bud, contact us. Now you see what the format's like, because we love sharing these memories, even the painful ones, like your car going up in an inferno when someone throws a cigarette in their back seat and lights your vehicle on fire. There's got to be good memories.
It's something else. I mean, the Merchandise Mart, working on the 19th floor, it was always very interesting. You never knew which was coming up next. You could get the word the day before that, there's going to be some important guests when Phil Donahue does his 7-minute segment for the Today Show, where we've got Luciano Pavarotti, we've got along with Sophia Loren and Sir George Solti on as guests, and it's sort of like, how many times do you meet that type of guest on a television show? And very interesting. I think every Italian that worked for NBC stuck his head in the studio that day, and you hear different words of Italian that you didn't understand, but, that was fun. But then that was a good, fun, happy story. Worked, being able to put a lavalier on Sophia Loren or Dolly Parton. That was another, two of my favorites there. And that was a positive, happy story on the 19th floor of the Merchandise Mart. But then we had other days where you walk in to start your tour and come on, let's go. We got to go. We're going on the air early. There's been an airplane crash. And at first I thought they were talking about like a little Piper Cub or something, but no, it was Flight 191, American Flight 91 out at O'Hare.
So just for our younger audiences, let's kind of recap what this was. This was the plane that upon kind of departing crashed very soon thereafter in Elk Grove Village. Is that correct? Is that the one?
That is correct.
What was it like? You were obviously there, you heard about it. You're probably listening to scanner traffic. Can't even imagine. What was that like?
Well, where I was at, we didn't have the scanner. The newsroom really, really, really went into action. We had a desk person at WMAQ. Her name was Val Press. And she gets on her microphone and starts calling out the crews. Start heading for O'Hare. Start heading for O'Hare. Start heading for O'Hare. And that not only included local crews, but it also included network crews. And I think maybe Dave Durham, who's retiring here today, he was heavily involved with that story quite a bit. And a cameraman that I was going to work with in the future, Randy Birch, he was out there, was one of the first crews. But getting the equipment in the early days of electronic news gathering, the right equipment, the trucks and the equipment on top of the trucks and being able to point it into the Sears or the Hancock building, it was a major story. And the chief engineer got a hold of a number of engineers, and we brought they were talking about bringing a studio camera, a TK, I think it's a 44, out to the roof, because you could see it from the roof of the Merchandise Mart. If we looked northwest, you could see the smoke billowing up. But instead, they went downstairs. They got this TK-76 like what I had here, and they brought that out with it had an 18-to-1 zoom on it, and they were actually able to get a picture really, really early in the story. But that was a day that no one went home. Anybody that was working for WMAQ that day, and I'm working in the control room, and the control room loaded up with management, news management, and management of the station, just waiting to see that picture. And I had audio from out at the scene that I put on preview that you could listen, like say if they were going to do a mic check, and you could hear this eerie sort of a mechanical noise in the background, and guys were testing the microphones, making sure that it worked right. And George Peebles and I think it was either John Crisp or Warren Teuber, some of our former engineers and great camera people, all of a sudden this picture came up, and it looked like a smoldering battlefield. And it was sort of hard to believe what we were looking at. And the anchors were describing what was going on. And there were a number of different reporters that ended up out there. And we were basically, I was sitting behind that audio board from Studio E most of the night, where we did drop-ins for nightly news. And later on, before the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, we broke into the network with live reporting from the scene. And that was, there's a couple of other stories that in my career that stand out, but that one was, and I said it when I retired. I said, we had a very interesting career, but you hate making money off of other people's grief and tragedy. It's just, you can make a great living at what you're doing, but geez, it's not all flower shows and baseball games and happy stories. There's a lot of bad stuff in there along with it. And that was the first bad one that I did working at WMAQ.
You also, so you saw quite a lot working in local news. At some point, you went over to network within NBC Network, where you covered 17 states. You guys basically were the middle ground between New York and LA, covering anything that happened. Tell us some memories there. And I also got to say, in the interest of full disclosure, I got to say, from stories I've heard, there were some traveling reporters who were used to their New York crews and LA crews who'd sometimes throw you guys under the bus. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah, that's, under the bus. Yeah, you're lucky if it was a bus and not a cow or a donkey, You get thrown at different places, but the network was an entirely different thing traveling. And for the most part, we took commercial airlines. You need to be in Minneapolis or Detroit or Kansas City. We got sometimes as far east as Philadelphia and far west as Denver. Did a lot of work in Colorado, and with different correspondents, and that was almost split down the middle. too. There was really great stories, and you meet interesting people in interesting places. But then there was also, sad stories covering from Chicago, like the Tylenol murders. That was a really ugly period in Chicago. And we did a lot of work. There was a lot of different elements for different correspondence that we did from Chicago. And that was interesting. But we traveled to a town down near St. Louis, Times Beach, Missouri, where the whole town, the town no longer exists. There was a spill of dioxin. They were spraying dioxin on the streets as to hold down the dust. And we were exposed to it. I shouldn't be laughing. We were exposed to it like 18 times. We went down there to do follow-ups, and the network crew from Chicago, sort of like an investigative story, broke loose that, the government the EPA was saying that the levels of dioxin on the street, in the dust and the dirt, were okay. It was okay for people to live there. And Mark Nycanen, who was an investigative reporter, and Chuck Collins, who was the producer for him, someone mailed him a packet of information from the EPA with the actual figures. And the figures, the amount of dioxin was actually 500 times higher than what they were actually putting out to the newspapers. And that's when they decided everybody's got to go. And what had happened is that the Merrimack River had flooded. It had went over its banks, and the water was washing this dioxin everywhere. And people were up to their, sitting on the roofs because the water had got that high. And, we did a lot of helicopter work, and we were out there, with hip waders on, getting that story and whatever it took to get that picture. And that was an interesting time there too. NBC was concerned, and they sent us to doctors up at Northwestern to get blood samples to see if any of it had made it into our systems. But, at the time, medicine, it showed that, no, none of us were contaminated with the dioxin, but we threw away our clothes before we got back on the plane. They, management told us, whatever you do, toss them, incinerate them, get rid of them. We don't want that on an airplane or in a rental car, or don't bring it back home, get rid of it. So there was a lot of, a few stories like that. Times Beach was one, the Tylenol murders, a number of different things working for the network. And same thing, you meet interesting people, you do great storytelling. You could be in St. Louis or Minneapolis or Detroit, and you work hard all day long getting the story together. And this is before satellite trucks. NBC would ask
you about that. I'm sure, along with all the other stories you covered, some of the highlights, maybe lowlights, have got to have been elections. We just had Henry Cheatham on yesterday, who talked about his coverage. He was talking in particular about the one with, who was it? Michael Dukakis and the Reverend Jesse Jackson and his experiences with that. I'm sure you've covered many elections, or if not covered, kind of filled in for people while they were covering. Talk to me about election life, because you are basically not living at home. You're living on the road in a suitcase.
Yes, the suitcase, the famous suitcase. I don't think I own it anymore, but yeah, covering Jesse Jackson since he was from Chicago. And NBC had I'm not sure who the correspondent was, but the producer that was working on Jesse Jackson's campaign, her last name was Bundles, and she was very close to Reverend Jackson. So, we do different stories about, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and we'd be parked out in front of his house down there on, I think it was Constance and 67th Street, around in that area there near Jackson Heights. And, in case anything happened, if he was going to say anything, okay, we were there. And you just park out in front of his house. And then we got the call that one of his sons, and I forget which son, was graduating from high school. And the producer asked, he says, well, maybe you could do us a favor. We're going to go out and shoot the graduation for the Reverend, so he'll have some record of it. So that was our gift to Reverend Jesse Jackson, that he had, the whole graduation of his son from out of high school. And, that was, that's another happy story there, and it was very interesting seeing how the political, the coverage, the way they used to cover it back then, it was really, you had one crew, and we were taking the place of some crew that got the weekend off or 3 days off. We were taking their place. And it was basically the campaign had slowed down a little bit there, so the other crews could go back home and recharge their batteries. So that was something, that whole campaign there. But I basically got off of the crew that I was on with Randy Birch because I knew he was going to be involved with the politics. And living out of a bag, and your family doesn't see you, your friends, your girlfriends, everybody, they don't see you. You're just, you're absent, you're gone. There's a birthday party or a confirmation or a wedding. Well, where were you? Well, I was out in East Cornflake, Iowa, chasing a pig farmer around. So, I could see that coming up and getting on and off an airplane 3 or 4 times a day, 5 times a day to chase the candidate around. And I said, you know what? I don't know. It's almost like you're guaranteed you're going to make a certain amount of money because you're out on the road.
You're going to make a lot of money, right? You're on the road.
Oh, a lot of money.
You're giving up your life. You're trading it for these experiences and money.
Right.
But it's a harsh way to make that money.
It was harsh. So I said, I came back to management. Our management supervisor upstairs on the 19th floor, his name was Bill Carter. Great guy. Just a fantastic person, a great manager, was just really good at what he did. And I came to him, I said, Bill, I've already talked to Randy, and I said, I would love to be on the tour with you, and I know it would probably end up onto the floor of the convention with you, but I don't think I want to put up with I guess it's what you would call putting up with. The toll, you'd just pay the toll would be just a little bit too much. And I said, I'd like to come back and work in Chicago again. And as it turns out, they were putting together more network crews to replace the crews from Chicago that were going out on the campaign.
And we'll get to that in just a second, Jimmy Mack. But before we do, I want to hear about that time you were tear gassed in Iowa in the farmers' protest.
Oh, out in Colorado, Springfield, Colorado, with Randy Birch. Fred Briggs, who was a correspondent, and Rod Prince was the field producer. And, okay, we're going to a farm auction. And there's word is that they're not going to allow this.
Crazy.
Oh, yeah, things really got completely out of hand. We're going to go out there. There might be fisticuffs because the other farmers don't want this farm to be auctioned off. They think that, this whole thing is wrong. And when you hear the story, you basically agree with the farmers. What was happening to them was not right. But
Jimmy, we go in. Make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Was this so the bank is auctioning off properties when farmers couldn't pay, and so I see you nodding yes, so that must be correct. And I can assume a lot of the community would be very much with their neighbors, with the people that they've kind of seen throughout their lives. Is that essentially what was behind all these emotions?
That what was going on. And in the middle of winter, there's a foot of snow on the ground. And to see 300 farmers out there on their John Deere tractors encircling the town, the courthouse, the county courthouse, just going around in circles, just around and around and around. You don't normally see that during the winter. You don't see farm tractors out. And then came the time to auction it off. And the sheriff came out with a bullhorn and tried to start the auction. And they shouted him down. And then one of the farmers took a swing at the sheriff, which was not a smart thing to do. He went back inside, went up to the second floor, and dropped tear gas out of the second floor. And along with coming back down to the first floor and spraying us all with mace. So we had camera crews from ABC, CBS Network, and NBC. CNN was not there at the time. CNN was just beginning to get off the ground. So they didn't have field crews or producers or equipment to go out and cover an event like that. So CNN bought the footage from maybe a freelancer or one of the local TV stations, but I got a good face of a face full of mace and tear gas. That's something that it'll take a long time to forget that. And as we're putting snow up onto our face, the sheriff had pulled the farmer that hit him, pulled him in, and they arrested him. And they brought him up to the second floor. And as everybody puts down their equipment, to try to take care of their face, from the second floor, this farmer bails out from the second floor with his hands in handcuffs. And he lands into this pile of snow. And you got to get the tape machine, you got to get the camera, you got to take pictures of what's going on there. It's like something out of a movie, really, what took place there. So we went back to the hotel room. We gave all our videotape to Fred Briggs and Rod Prince, who was the producer. They took it back to Denver and they edited the story, put it together. And I sat back in the hotel room, and the hotel room was literally 10 foot square. The TV set was mounted in the wall. And I watched, ABC's got it up on there, then went to CBS, and then we saw our story. But then I switched over to CNN, and the poor folks down in Atlanta, it was completely out of sequence, the events that had taken place. And I would say that they didn't get the story right. But the very next day, NBC, Fred Briggs, myself, Randy Birch, and Rod Prince had to go do a sit-down interview with the sheriff that sprayed us in our faces, the very next day. And I'm like, But then you heard his side of the story. Okay, NBC and covering the story, we got both sides, and that was one thing that was, you had to do it. You had to get both sides of the story, get the point of view of the sheriff. And I don't know, we never talked to the farmer who got arrested. Hopefully he's still walking around someplace today.
Jimmy Mack, I know you can't see some of the captions that are coming up, but I do want to, Ed Bartlett says, Jimmy Mack and Bobby D, best of the best. I know you worked with Ed at the network. And Eddie, I know you're watching this because obviously you're commenting. We want you on the show as well. We want you to kind of talk about your experience and all of this. But you obviously at that time, were you taking video at this farm auction or were you audio?
I was audio. I was carrying a Sony BVU 50. And speaking of Eddie Bartlett, it was the Ed and Mabel show, the Mabel and Ed show. I forget some of the video that came back from Mabel and Ed. They were one of the other crews that took over for Bobby DeServi. And I talked to Bobby DeServi all the time. He's out in Colorado now. But I was carrying, that's all I was really interested in at the time. I knew that any camera work I was going to do was nowhere going to come close to what Randy Birch was doing. His whole entire family, his father, his grandfather had been in the news business going back many, 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 many years. And but I was carrying a Sony BVU 50, and the shotgun on the end of a pole. And my attitude was, well, okay, CBS and ABC are going to get it. Well, I'm going to get it better. You had to get. That was my attitude that I always had in the back of my head. Okay, they might have something. Eddie Bartlett gave me the moniker of Mac Gadget. It's Jimmy Mack, but he's actually known as Mac Gadget because I'd always be coming up with, oh, hey, let's give this a try. Oh, okay, that works pretty well. Everybody else would be on, what the heck is that thing, Mac? Don't worry about it. You'll listen to it tonight.
So you were out there MacGyvering these things. You were finding
absolutely.
I got that tool. This is what we're going to do. This is what I'm going to create.
Right, little things here and there. During the campaign, finally, we got rid of the rental equipment. We were using some pretty outdated, heavy-duty, a TK-76 and a BVU 110, which is a large tape machine that they were renting. And the network finally sent in cases, and I mean cases of cameras, lighting, audio, brand new tape machines, you name it, the best of the best. And I figured out one of these days I'm going to have to send this stuff back. How can I glom onto this? This is something that I'll be able to use in local, that'll make local, my audio gathering, that much better, and some items it did turn out that I just said that it came up missing or something, but we still used it here in Chicago after the campaign was over with.
Jimmy Mack, I'm just going to mention this. I know you cannot see the picture that I'm putting up right now. Eddie, if you're still on, maybe you can in the comments text this. I'm just giving an idea to people about how the tethering worked, how you as an audio engineer were tethered to your photographer. I've put up a picture. Actually, Jimmy Mack, maybe you do know who this is. It's one of the pictures that you sent me where you're holding kind of a boom for your photographer. Eddie, if you're on there, if you could just comment who this photographer is, I would love to I'd love to give him credit, but I just kind of want to display how it was that you guys were literally a team. When I'm saying a team, you guys were tethered together. You almost had to anticipate what the other person's doing so as not to trip over yourselves, literally and figuratively.
Oh, absolutely. It might be Randy Birch or it might be Bobby DeServi. If it's a nice sunny and the camera person has a shirt around his neck, that's Randy Birch.
Apollo. He's got a mustache.
Right.
Black and white photo.
Okay. Oh well, I might be off on that one there. We were down in Arizona covering the Cubs for the network news, for the nightly news, and I was working with Randy Birch, and the weather was beautiful, and as you say, we were tethered like that, and if he was walking backwards, I'd always put my finger in his belly.
G-Mac, Bud has actually identified the photographer as Hal Bernstein, who I know was one of your mentors. So this is one of the examples of when you got the chance to work with one of your mentors. Tell us what that was like. And you know what's interesting in our industry? Like, I'll talk to my wife, Sarah, who's producing for me. I think we're the only industry where, because I grew up watching of photographers that you guys who came before us are kind of like, everyone's got a story about them. If we didn't know you, we've heard of you. And Hal Bernstein's a name that we have heard of coming down. Tell us some of your favorite stories of Hal Bernstein.
Oh, well, we did a lot of production work. Channel 5 on Saturday nights between 6 and 6:30 before the network would start up, they would have a half hour that they could, dedicate to local production. And Warner Saunders would be in the studio, and he would start out. It was sort of like a PM magazine type of a show where you'd have different segments, different stories. And the production department at WMAQ, they had a number of producers, and we would meet up with the producers and go out and do different stories about a whole gamut. I mean, it ranged from sports to music, you name it. And they had some of the best editors, like a John Martin editing. But Hal and myself, we really knocked it out. I mean, we're, a mentor, my rabbi, or whatever, my brother, we're still partners today. I hope he's watching. Very good friend.
Send him the link. I'm going to send him the link right after. Actually, I'm going to take this opportunity to give a plug to something we're doing tomorrow, because hopefully you'll see him there. I know every so often there's reunions for WMAQ old chimers. We're actually tomorrow, 8 o'clock, doing a virtual Zoom reunion. And I know quite a few people have expressed interest, RSVP'd. I know Ed Mahan had talked about it earlier. Talked to a couple other people who are, Ed, want to make sure you're out there if you're free 8 o'clock Saturday as well. But again, this is a good opportunity to really, this could serve as an icebreaker, Jimmy Mack. Like, here are some of the stories we're hearing. And like Noel Montenegro, a couple of the younger generation of guys who have always heard these names along with myself. Now you know a little about these people. Ask them about some of these stories. Ask them about some of these experiences. Ask them how the industry's changed. This is what this is all about, communication. The art of communication, Jimmy Mack.
Yeah, and if your partners on a camera crew, you probably communicated pretty. You knew what direction they were going in, and it's the same thing with Hal. If he started walking backwards, I'd put my index finger in the belt loop, and I'd be the eyes on the back of his head, so he doesn't fall down and crack his head open. That happens numbers of times as being a one-man band. Guys have taken a spill walking backwards, which is always can be a career-ending accident, So as a two-man band,
as we call it, where and you were just about to hit it, and I interrupted you, and I'm sorry for that. But two-man band, that was something that was more commonplace back then, where you had a partner in crime. When you backpedal these days as a single person, it's a little bit more difficult. But speak to how it was when you had that second person who was your eyes and ears, and you put their trust in your hands when you were backpedaling. It's like that team building activity. Fall back, I'll catch you. Sometimes,
that type of a deal, or stop him from falling. That type of a thing. Here you're carrying a TK-76 that weighs, it seems like 95 pounds today. This big, huge piece of metal on your shoulder, and that's the last thing. Well, you want to get that shot, and it really would work out well, but you don't want to, break your back on it or crack your head open. But that was the name of the game. Keeping the cameraman, keeping an eye out for him. That was the way I did it. I put my finger and led them. Okay, we need to move to the right, or we need to move to the left, or I tell them, okay, we're coming up to a curb here. We got to watch it, that type of a thing. And I do that not only with Hal, but any other cameraman that was at NBC that I had the opportunity of carrying a tape machine for. And at that time, I really didn't have any ambitions on becoming a camera guy, where everybody thought, well, okay, we're going to have, a tape machine and a camera. That's what it's going to be like for the rest of our lives. No, the beta cams were coming out, and the M2 equipment, and the second man was going away. Oh, well, it was sort of hard, change. Nobody likes change, but that's what was coming down the road. That the equipment that was already in the test kitchens. I think the broadcasters knew that what's coming, coming up next. So, most of the audio guys also became camera guys. So what can you say? In due time, it didn't happen overnight. It took a little while for that to happen, but okay. So you're going to be going to learn another trade here. I'm going to learn how, the camera work and lighting and stuff like that too. So
you learn another trade. You learn another trade, but never give up the expertise you kind of picked up along the way. And how I can tell this is it's very different when I talk to true broadcast engineers like yourself. When I was talking yesterday with Henry Cheatham, it's that when I told you, hey, I want you to be on this show, it wasn't like, let me pop up my internet iPad and get something on the air. You are coming to us live with a prosumer camera. You got a lav set up. There's pride going on here. I look behind your left and the right shoulder. I notice those carefully placed Emmys that I'm going to ask about. I mean, you are a broadcast engineer. You're not a person who's like, let's pop on for the show. When you guys did things, you did it the right way. You had audio, you had video, and you had pride.
Oh, absolutely. For a long time there, you consider yourself an engineer. Oh, ask you, well, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an engineer for NBC in Chicago. Oh, okay. Well, you could say a cameraman or a videotape editor or a lighting director or a number of things. Videotape, working in the large 2-inch tape room, or editing 3/4-inch tape. But I said, yeah, I'm an engineer. I can do audio. I can be an audio assistant out in the studio. Once you learn it, it's sort of hard to forget.
And I noticed you haven't forgotten it yet. I got something to ask you right here. Hey, look at Natalie Martinez saying that she loves it. Natalie, we love that you're watching, that you're showing Jimmy Mack his due pride and what he did, his due just desserts, I guess. Eddie Bartlett had a question that I got to ask you. Julius, let's see, I want to make sure I don't butcher this. Julius Boros. Tell us.
Boros.
Tell us the story.
Oh, well, he was like another network cameraman that I worked with occasionally. If Randy was on vacation or John Scott was on vacation, okay, I'm going to replace John Scott. And I worked with Julius a number of times. You know, he had this accent from Hungary that was very, very interesting. But he moved over to NABET as a NABET cameraman for the network from IATSE. He was an IA cameraman that, you know, you wonder how many thousands and thousands of feet of film that he had shot. But we went down and covered the Kentucky Derby. Hey, great. John Scott was on vacation. Hey, I'm going to go work the Kentucky Derby. And that was a fantastic time. That was something that I didn't expect right off the bat. Another happy story, another positive, good thing for weekend nightly news. You know, you shoot the story, you hand it to a courier, they take and edit it. There was an edit room set up at the affiliate down in Louisville, and they fed it to New York, and it got on the air. Yeah, Julius, and then I worked with him a couple of times after he had taken the buyout. They were looking to make the staff smaller, and he was told, well, okay, if you take the buyout and if you buy equipment, well, NBC will hire you on as a daily, you know, as a freelancer. And I had worked with him a number of times as a, you know, working for NBC, but working with him who was and we covered a number of stories in the Midwest. And, you know, sad to say that he passed away here a few years ago. Sorry to hear about that, but the stories that he had seen in his career, you know, if you could have somehow documented everything that he had seen, and a very good cameraman too.
Jimmy Mack, you know, one of the stories that comes to mind when I ask you about how as kind of covering network news out of Illinois, covering those 17 states, you didn't often work with some of these reporters, how sometimes you guys were thrown under the bus. Tell me about the time you found yourself in a crane getting audio, and that all that work that you guys did was called into question. Because I find stories like that interesting.
We were doing a story for the Today Show, and it was about Spam, the luncheon meat.
Huh.
And same thing. It had to be in Rochester, Minnesota, one of the coldest weeks of the year. And Eddie Banks and myself, it was during that period where we replaced the network crews that went to do the political campaign. We were doing the stories from in the Midwest that they normally would have been doing. Eddie Banks and myself, okay, you're going to go to Rochester, Minnesota and meet up with producer X, you know, and the stories were Mike Leonard, one of the best people to work for. Mike Leonard was just...
I got to ask you this. You're going to Minnesota, which is known to be cold during one of the coldest times. You find yourself in a crane. I'm sure all that work was very well appreciated. Rebuttal?
Oh, well, it got back to us a few weeks later that, hey, that crew from Chicago, all their video was green and all their audio was distorted. It's like, we got called into the office. You know, hey, what went wrong out there? I said, wrong? You know, I viewed the tape. I knew what I heard in my earpiece. I know what I heard coming off the tape when I watched it later on. And Eddie Banks said the same thing. We're like sitting there going, well, somehow the producer really had it out for the Midwest crews. He was mad that he was not able to bring a crew from Burbank, you know, to the Midwest to cover the story. And, you know, he was all smiles when he was with us, but then he went back to LA, and then all of a sudden all these stories started coming up. Well, Rod Prince, who now then was the network bureau chief, hey, I want to see these tapes. And he calls and he gets a hold of his boss and says, all this stuff is coming in about our crew from Chicago, and I know better. I want to see those tapes. If he's saying that these tapes, the video was green and that the audio was distorted, I want to see it in person. And Rod Prince really stood up for us. And he was a prince, obviously. He was a fantastic boss to have, great supervisor. And they got to the bottom of it, that this guy was full of you-know-what, you know. And I still know his name. Eddie Bartlett might have worked with him too.
You don't have to mention the name. You don't have to mention the name. I'd rather you not.
No. I'm not going to get into lawsuits here, but this guy deserved a kick in his butt for for what he was doing. And we're saying, well, if he's doing that to us, I can only imagine how many other crews that he's doing this to, and who knows if that guy is still in the business today. With that type of shenanigans going on behind the scenes, I can't see where. I was just waiting to say, oh, you're working with, producer X again. I was just waiting for that, to have the opportunity to have a nice talk with him about, what had taken place there. And that stunk. It was just because Eddie was very conscientious. Once again, another IATSE cameraman that came across to join up with NABIT. He was a steward down in the shop down there and a great guy to work with. And have a lot of good memories on a lot of good stories that we worked on. It's strange how you can work alongside and never have anything nasty to say about each other. I think we got along pretty good. And I ran into him about 9 months ago, at a doctor's visit downtown Chicago. Him and his wife were sitting out in front of the office, and I'm getting ready to go into the office, and I hear, "Hey," and I turn around, Eddie Banks, what the heck are you doing here? I thought you moved to Las Vegas. It's like, the world keeps getting smaller by the minute.
So I'm going to take a moment to ask you your blessing and permission to go a little longer with you. These are usually an hour-long show, but as you know, whenever we have a conversation, it's never limited to an hour, and I don't want to limit this one. If you've got the time and the energy, let's talk more about what you've done. Great,
Raza. I laid off the beer tonight, so I don't have to get off the chair. I'm doing great. I laid off. No, I'm not a beer drinker, but I would be glad to. We've only scratched the surface here. I'm glad to hear from all my friends.
No, and I'm you know what? And I actually want to remind all the friends who are commenting that there should be a link. There should be a link in the comments. If you click that, you can actually pop up and join this conversation. We'd love to, if any of you guys want to join, have you and ask the questions directly. What I do want to ask is that we give a shout out to your nephew who helped you put this together. He's an entrepreneur himself, right? Tell us a little about what he's doing.
Well, there's a number of us. I shouldn't say a number. There's a group of us that worked at NBC, and my nephew Matt Nix. He started a company, a corporation, and it's called Chicago Projection Mapping. And we've all seen, or maybe you have, or maybe you have not seen, what projection mapping might involve. And the first thing that comes to my mind is the Merchandise Mart. And he's been a consultant to the Merchandise Mart. He's worked with Cirque du Soleil on their video production. When he produced a video for Cirque du Soleil that was projected onto the Merchandise Mart. He has worked did a production for the University of Notre Dame. Chicago Projection Mapping. He's a very smart guy. His equipment, the computer equipment, some of his audio equipment, the monitors, and, up to 10 minutes before our broadcast here today, he was pulling my butt out of the fire once again. You get the young guys out there, but
I saw you there FaceTiming him to kind of problem solve, and that's what I love about this collaboration. We got broadcast television engineers, professional, and then you got the next generation who understands the online version a little more, walking you through it on Facebook. I had my wife Sarah here, who basically helps with the online show. It's about that collaboration and working together. And what I love about what your nephew is doing is he's got yourself and a couple other of your colleagues who are helping advise, consult with him, right? Throw a couple of those names.
Absolutely. Dave Antler and Connie Antler, who very good friends of mine since grade school, that helped me get my job at NBC. I came to them and Hal Bernstein and a couple of other friends. I said, hey, there's an opportunity here. And we'd like to my nephew Matt Nix would like to demonstrate to you exactly what projection mapping is. And then you can go from there and look at it. And we can all make an investment and get this company off the ground. And that's exactly what we did. And the rest is history with some of the big larger productions, especially at the University of Notre Dame twice. It was really remarkable, projecting video onto the building under the Golden Dome and basically doing the actual history of the University of Notre Dame that they put up there. It was magnificent. And the music that went along with it, just really remarkable. And it took quite a bit of work, working with other corporations in Chicago that would bring out these large video projectors, not like something you would see in a restaurant or a bar. These are the size of a small Volkswagen. It's the big time stuff. It's and he does a good job with everything that he touches. It's got to be right. It's got to be perfect, or it doesn't get. He doesn't want to put his name on it.
I'm going to take this moment to say that I've put a link up. If you guys see this link that went up on the Media Essential Workers website, you can click on that link and you can pop up here, audio and video. Of course, if you do that, you consent that we use you in this live stream. But pop up here, ask Jimmy Mack some of the questions you have directly and in person. We had Derek Robinson a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of his frat brothers actually popped up, which was pretty cool. It's always fun to do all that, but I do want to actually ask something that Eddie asks here. I'm going to ask his question and then share some stuff that I've heard. He said, ask Jimmy about Lear jets and Lincoln Town cars, first class travel in the old days. And I do want to share a story. I talked to Hedy Zussman, who obviously many of us know, and she talked about her experiences being, if not the first, one of the first minicamp people. If she wasn't the first, she was one of the first. And she used to talk about how she put on her fur coats and get in these jets and go to cover a VO, to cover something that now we rely on affiliates. But back then, if Chicago wanted a story, Chicago sent someone to get that story. Jimmy Mack, tell us about that.
Absolutely. Lear jets at Meigs Field. You've got the pager on. We weren't supposed to keep the pager on. If you're off the clock, you're not supposed to have the pager on, but the pager was on. And if it went off, that meant, something big is happening on our day off. And I got the message, start heading for Meigs. And I parked my car at Meigs. We got on a Learjet and we went to Denver with Jim Cummins. And I forget who the producer was. There had been a natural gas explosion at one of these large tanks in Denver. And it was really, really burning. And, you get on the Learjet and, there goes, and it was on Easter. So there goes Easter Sunday dinner. But we made it to Denver. We got the story. We got footage from the affiliate. Once again, we sat down and edited the story in Denver and fed it to New York. And the story got on the air. Stand-ups with Jim Cummins, with whatever footage we could shoot by then. The name of the game was get the story on the air. You had presence with the correspondent, and who knows how much a flight to Denver in a Learjet would cost. But as we got off the plane, when we got to Denver, the deal would always say to the captain of the plane, have a tray of sandwiches when on the way back. So out would come this big 3-foot round tray of sandwiches and pop and potato chips. And it's like, well, there was Easter dinner on the way back to Chicago to Meigs. So, but once again, it was sort of disturbing, and it put a chink in the armor of Easter dinner with the family, but it also paid for the dinner or the movie the next week with the lady I was going out with. So, you had the money in your pocket for about a week, and it was like, well, okay. That was part of the deal of working on the network. Eddie Bartlett, he had experienced that a number of times too. And working with Eddie, I mean, we were sort of cut from the same cloth, listening to scanners and radio. And when the bosses would come down saying, well, there's going to be a cutback on overtime locally. This is on a local basis. And we're gonna cut back on overtime. It's just, it's out of hand here. Eddie would have his scanner and I would have my scanner, and then you're listening to it and you call up to the news desk and say, what are we doing on this 311 out or the 411 that they've got out 79th and wherever, they're like, what 3 level? Oh, it's been on the scanner. Didn't you hear it? Start heading there. Get on the way. Okay, you got an extra hour here and there. It paid for the scanner. Let's put it that way.
You made your overtime. You found something that was worth covering, and you covered it.
Right. I shouldn't be spreading these lies like I'm doing here, Raza. But no. But Eddie and I, and Eddie continued to do it, and I still listen. Today, you can listen to what's going out in California on your cell phone. You can listen to Police and Fire, and that's interesting too. But I limit my amount of time that I listen to scanners anymore.
I don't know if you ever saw my stringer mobile. I started as a stringer myself. I'd gotten to that point where I could hear the candor or the cadence of someone's voice and wake up to it and be like, I got to cover this. You got to see those old Crown Vics with multiple antennas. I still got it sitting in the garage. My wife's like, you got to get rid of it. I'm like, that's my youth. That thing stays. But you're talking to someone who's got that in his blood too. For the sake of the marriage, I don't listen to it 24/7 anymore.
Yeah, we would play tricks with the stringers. Hal Bernstein and myself both did, and I'm trying to remember where it was. It was down at the Drake Hotel, and the stringers were trying to find. I don't know. It was not Princess Diana. It might have been some religious figure, and we were on the clock later than 10:30. Yeah. And he's talking to me on the two-way radio, and I'm talking to him on the two-way radio, and we know that the stringers are listening to us. I said, well, okay, here he comes.
Disinformation, right, Jimmy Mack? That's that disinformation that's coming out. Throw him right off the trail, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, here he comes. Oh, yeah, I got him over here on the Pearson Street. Oh, I got him over. Okay, it looks like they're going to be coming in this door. And then in the background, we're hearing these squealing tires. And here comes one of the other stringers in Chicago. And the car was basically up on two wheels as it went around the corner because he didn't want to miss that shot. And then he pulls up and the car's smoking. And of course, we're just standing there with our mouths open laughing. It's sort of like, I shouldn't even admit that we did stuff like that. But hey, all is fair in news warfare, You
got to entertain yourself. When those long nights happen, you got to find your own entertainment.
Yes.
I would first like to, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, we got Hal Bernstein joining us, watching The View. Thank you very much, Hal, for coming. And also, it's an honor. I've got to say, it's an absolute honor. We'd love to have you on the show as well. But Hal asks a question. Ask him about SiloCam.
Oh, SiloCam. Now, that was very interesting. Hal and I were involved with out in Somonauk, Illinois. There was a case out in Somonauk, Illinois. A young gal, Lisa Ackerman is her name, and I don't know how I remember it. Lisa Ackerman, a horrible story where Brian Dugan, was arrested and never admitted to the Lisa Ackerman murder. And the only way Somonauk, Illinois has to be 70, 80 miles to the straight west of Chicago. And with our trucks, we could not, even with the microwave gear that we had, you could not hit the top of the Sears building. Everybody else, Channel 2, 7, I'm not sure about 9 or 32, but we could not get in. So we rented the top of a silo in downtown Somonauk, Illinois. And we put the 2 gigahertz goldenrods, the antennas that we had, and with a walkie-talkie, we were able to pan it in and get a picture in. And then from the silo down to the police station across this road, we ran coax. We ran a Siamese cable down, and fed it from there. And then when the story started to slow down and finally sort of go away, we got back up on the top of the silo and took all the equipment down. Today, you think back about that, and that was really something else. And touring around in a helicopter, floating alongside a Piper Cub where they were looking for the child, and they finally did end up finding the little girl in between Somonauk and the next town to the west in a ditch, and it was a sad story. Every time I go out there in that direction, I think back to those days, and it was it wasn't, it was warm weather and getting up into a silo and making sure that, but once again, that's what it took to get the shot in, and I've still got a couple of pictures that are around somewhere. I wish if I could have found them, I would have had them for you here. Yeah, Hal and I, we spent a lot of time going out there from downtown Chicago to Somonauk and covering the news conferences and everything else that was involved with it there. That was another one of the sadder stories that we covered.
You don't get the nickname McGadget for nothing. You see and you make it work.
Little things. I still got them here today, and I need to divest myself of all this. I don't think Matt Nix has any interest in coming and picking this stuff up. We've been pitching stuff, cable and stuff that, why in God's name did why did you bring this home? Well, they were pitching it. So, I thought, well, maybe it's got some use, but what do you do?
I still got my old beta decks from my Stringer days. Again, I'm like, what's old is new. Maybe that'll come back. Maybe I'll need those beta decks. My wife's like, get that the hell out of my house. But you know what? There they stay. So I get you, man. I get you, Jimmy Mack. We're on the same page about that. Eddie asks, ask Jimmy Mack who would say KSJ 871.
KSH 871 was the Federal Communications Commission's license number that they gave NBC in Chicago. And that was Val Press. Val Press was the lady that really called the shots when Flight 191 went down. She had her own network in the newsroom. She had two microphones. She had a microphone that was connected up to the radios, and she had a pad that she could hit different numbers for our pagers. And it all went out on the same frequency. She could either talk to us on a two-way radio or send a message over our pagers. And the number was KSJ 871 to the McDonald Bartlett crew, or the Bartlett McDonald crew, or the Mabel Miller crew, or, all the different crews. She was the queen bee. And she started many, 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 many years before I ever started. She started with John Chancellor when John Chancellor was working in the newsroom at the beginning days of NBC News in Chicago, Clifton Utley, and really the best at what she did. But that second microphone that she very rarely touched, it was like on an intercom that went up to the executives, all the management offices. And it was called the Rabbit Network. I don't know why it got that name. But if something major like Flight 191 happened, she would press down on that microphone and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had an airplane accident at O'Hare," which meant the traffic up on the 20th floor, okay, stop all airplane commercials for any airlines. No more commercials for any of the airlines, United, Delta, any of them. You got to pull the plug on that. And that meant everybody got up out of their chairs and started moving on, okay, how are we going to handle this? And a major event like that, someone has to get catering for all the people that are working inside the merchandise mart that are working up on the 19th floor. Okay, if they're going to be here until midnight, we don't want them leaving the 19th floor to go get a sandwich. We'll bring food up to them. Okay, fine. There was a person that took care of that. But Val Press, and I've had arguments with her. I think everybody had an argument with her, but she had this one-of-a-kind voice. And after the Flight 191, after that whole episode was over with and things sort of settled down, it wasn't a thank you party. It was a recognition party that they had down at the not the sample room. It was called I forget the name of it was a banquet hall on the second floor of the merchandise mart. And
anyone watching this who might remember the name of that banquet room, let's put it out there, because again, all of this kind of paints a picture for what you guys used to do then, how this news coordination happened. I know we got Eddie Bartlett watching, we got Hal, we got Bud. Someone's got to remember what that banquet room was called, and let's talk about how this room was put together. I mean, so this wasn't part of NBC, but NBC utilized it as needed. Is that how that usually used to work?
The corporations, the companies that would do catering during one of the shows, they would have a banquet or a dinner or a luncheon, or give it tickets to go over to some of these potential customers. Go to the not the sample room. That was a separate little restaurant. Was it the M&M Club? Merchants, and it might have been the M&M Club, they called it. And the head of NBC came in, Mary Tyler Moore's husband. What was his name? I forget his name. He was basically running NBC, the programming and everything. And he came, and they also played a tape back of how the whole day started. They had a recording. Whenever you press down on the microphone to talk to the crews, they had the time of day. It was on one side, on one channel, and then they had Val Press talking on the other. And you heard her start out, KSJ 871 to George Peebles. And George Peebles that week was in one of the newer trucks that NBC management bought. It was a Chevy Suburban. Imagine this big Suburban with these big giant, it looked like Bigfoot coming down the street. And it had 2 towers on it. And George, start heading for O'Hare. We've got a big one. Okay, George, and whether it was Warren Toiber or John Crisp, they start heading towards O'Hare. Well, they've got this all down on tape. They're recording it. And there's a large group of NBC employees at this recognition get-together. And we'd like to thank, and he said, we'd like to thank Val Press for her work here. And they played it, and everybody stood up and applauded her. And she definitely needed applause for the way that she handled that job that day. The stories, there are hundreds of stories about how we covered it, but she was a major, a go-getter, the one that got the ball rolling on that one.
I want to thank you for sharing that story, and also thank Eddie Bartlett for reminding us that it was the M&M Club. You were right about that. It was the M&M Club was a conference room, and Grant Ticker, thank you, Jane, was Grant Ticker would have been the head of the programming.
Yes, Grant Tinker, right, correct.
Well, gosh, I mean, there's so much I can ask that I don't even know how to go. But if you're ready to keep this going, so too am I. You've told us a little about network life. We want to talk about a little getting back into local news. And actually, a question we had come up here was we're talking about big stories, some of the stories that have defined for you what it is that we do. Obviously, not all the stories are good. Some are downright devastating. Someone asked what it was like to cover 9/11. You were working when that happened. Describe what the atmosphere was like, what happened in the newsroom, how it all came to fruition, and when the realization happened, the scope of the story.
9/11, I was headed to work in the morning, and I was at the corner of Monroe Street and Lakeshore Drive, and I was still about a half hour early, and I'm listening to one of the radio stations. I think it might have been WLS. That was sort of strange to be listening to the Roma and whatever, I forget the name of her husband's show.
Roma. Yeah, Don and
Roma. And Don must have been looking at a monitor, and he says, "Oh my God, an airplane has just crashed into the World Trade Center in New York." And his wife, Roma's like, "Oh my goodness, this is horrible. This is horrible." And then literally 5 minutes later, "Oh my God, a second plane has crashed into the other tower." Now, and then I just put my foot down on the gas pedal, and I made it over to NBC Tower because I knew we were going to become very busy. And things started moving. Once again, managers from upstairs came. They had a good idea what they were going to do. They knew that the local and the network NBC was concerned in New York was going to need help. They're going to need help with crews. There's no way that you could get on an airplane and fly to New York. So, okay, start loading up the cars. Okay, they might send out a truck. But how you're going to have to work with an engineer from New York because you don't know where to point the dish or the goldenrods. Just loading bags and cases of equipment and videotape and batteries and chargers. And then it turned out that they were using either beta or M2. And if you opened up the tape machine to change tapes, the dust in the atmosphere played hell on the heads of the tape machine and destroyed a number of tape machines. And it was quite a job getting the crews on the road and getting them towards, going to New York. I was very proud, as a support team, getting the equipment, knowing where the equipment was at. It was me and the chief engineer of the station, Tom Powers, that came down. He says, Mac, I need you to start getting the bags out here, getting the equipment out, and we're going to need to load them up because they're going to be sending a number of crews. I don't remember exactly how many crews they sent to New York. I don't know where they stayed. I mean, that would be interesting to get on the show here, is someone that experienced that, going to New York and covering that. And Carol Maureen was in town in New York the day that happened, and we're lucky that we're still got her today with all the different things that took place there. That cloud of dust and dirt and asbestos and all the other nasty stuff. But supporting the crews from Chicago, that they were going it that way. And once again, if they needed extra tape, well, you just couldn't put it in a bag or a box and ship it to them, on a plane. It had to go out with more supplies, with a follow-up, crew, or, they had to go out there with enough equipment to keep things going.
Wow. Tell us about some of the other stories when you got back into kind of local news that kind of in some way had an inspiration that touched you, that either gave you hope or kind of gave you dread that day. Talk about some of the memories that you have in the local news aspect of it.
Well, the Chicago Bulls, that was a story in itself there. The whole Michael Jordan phenomenon, of covering them, lining up at the old Chicago Stadium to be able to get into the locker room afterwards. We didn't do too much live from the locker room because their locker room was about the size of a very, very small. There wasn't much room to work with down there. But when they moved over to the United Center, that was some exciting times there. Okay, you're going to be doing post game, and of course, every time you'd line up in front of the locker room with your equipment, and radio guys, the print guys, and television, we all line up in a row, and then he opens up the door at a specific time, and everybody files in, and everybody lines up in front of Michael's locker area there.
Wait, Jimmy Mack, I got to ask you, was it really that orderly, or when you have print guys and broadcast guys, was there that blocking everyone out kind of thing, or had you guys gotten it to a science back then? Because I'm thinking in my mind that's the ultimate, probably the ultimate scrum in a locker room with all these guys. And that I was in Massachusetts then. I didn't work there then. Describe to myself and everyone else who didn't work what that was like. Was it really as orderly as you let on?
There were many, many, many arguments in front of that door. You have these radio guys and the print guys that want to get in front of you. As far as they were concerned, there's no reason that you should be in there. And we had cable that was set up in there that we could go live if we had to, but lining up, and there was a very good friend, close friend, or basically acted like a father to Michael Jordan. His name was Gus. I forget his last name, but he was the keeper of the key. And he would get out there and say, you guys line up, and what the rules are here, and let's not try into this funny business. But then, okay, we line up, and then he'd come up to you and says, hey, we've got a charity fundraiser coming up. Who do I talk to get some swag from NBC, hats or umbrellas or T-shirts or jackets? I go, okay, Gus, I'll mention it to the right people, and we'll get some of that stuff over there. Then he goes over to the guys from ABC. All right, same with you. What does it take to get some swag from ABC? But it was always, there was pushing and shoving all the time. There'd be some heated words in there, and it was the same thing with the Sox and the Cubs. Different areas you're scrunched in there like this. You couldn't move. Very, very unusual. But once again, you always got the shot. The picture always got on the air, depending I'm not interested. I would love to have been sitting out there watching the game, but instead I'm under the bleachers in the hallway getting ready to march in there. And, okay, you got to, do your own blocking to get in there. And occasionally you would have a producer working with you or a reporter, sports reporter, but not always, So lots of times you would, some of your friends from radio, they'd be glad to hold the microphone for you, so you give them the wireless microphone so you had good usable audio and it made sense. But then once again, getting that tape out of the locker room and to the area where you could feed it back to the tower so you could get it into the sports broadcast on the 10 o'clock show, because a lot of it, but the Bulls, once again, Michael Jordan, covering that as a local story. He would appear at Elmhurst College. He would have a basketball class in the morning and in the afternoon. And he would come out there and explain to the kids, what's the proper way of playing basketball. I was given the assignment, okay, get out there. We're going to do a live shot into the 5:30 sports. Okay, fine, great. 5 o'clock sports. And so I get out there with the car and everybody else is standing there, ABC and, all the crews are, and we're just saying, I come up to him, I said, well, has anybody seen Michael? Is he here? No, he's not here yet. He'll be here in a little while. Don't worry, he'll be here. And we're just sitting there talking like any live shot where all the guys are just, shooting the breeze back and forth talking. And then all of a sudden, here comes a motorcycle followed by a black Chevrolet Suburban. And I didn't pay much attention to it, but the motorcycle pulled up right next to us. And I'm just looking at this, $40,000 BMW motorcycle. And the guy gets off the bike and pulls off his helmet. And there's Michael Jordan. And we're all sitting there sort of laughing. And I said, well, Michael, I have to tell you one thing. I've got to thank you for all the overtime you've created here. I'm buying new tires for my Corvair. And the guy from ABC, well, he's sending his daughter to college. And these other guys are buying toaster ovens and refrigerators with the how you've helped the economy here. And he's just sitting there laughing, but he was the type of guy who'd say, hey, and when you're through, come on out. We're all going to go out for a beer afterwards. If you're game for it, let's do it. He probably would have taken us up on it, but that was interesting. But then I don't know if it was close to that or not. And I've explained it, you take the good with the bad with this job. So you've got Michael Jordan, who's bringing so much happiness to the city of Chicago. And then all of a sudden the story comes, his father was robbed and murdered down in the South. I'm going, here's a guy that brings all this happiness. And now he's in this extreme grief, losing his dad, I'm thinking, and I did not cover that down south. I was basically stayed up here in Chicago and covered other stories. But, I could only imagine what it was like there going down there and talking about that, or covering it. It's sort of like, wow, that's rough, but, that's part of the job. It's, that you take when you sign up for the job. This is what you're going to see.
Makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I do want to talk to you about, I know we've talked a lot about your journalistic career and what you've done kind of behind the scenes, as well as some of the stories that inspired you, that touched you. One of the things that always touches me is no matter what time of day or night I want to call you and get advice. Most of the viewers we have here know that I'm the vice president of NABET. And in that role, I always find that communication is key, but also more importantly than that, the key is to learn and get experience and draw experience from the people who came before us, who have collaboratively fought for the people that they work with. And that's why I'm so appreciative that you always answer my calls and explain to me that this might be a situation where malicious obedience, or this might be a situation where you want to try this. And generally speaking, I just really want to say, first of all, thank you. But secondly, give you the opportunity to talk to someone who's been actively engaged. I think you're still a NABET card-carrying member years into retirement, which,
yes.
I applaud you for that. But I also want to, you keep in touch with the industry by talking to me. I tell you about some of the things that are going on. I want you to give advice to our generation, the people who are now growing up, coming up in news, about where you see the industry going, about what it takes to have a longevity in this career, about what you've seen about the evolution of this industry. Jimmy Mack, where do we go from here?
Well, when I started, I talked to a couple of guys that had been in the business for a while, like a Jerry Ungaro. Same thing, came over from IATSE, became a local cameraman in Chicago. And he says, the reason why we're making the buck that we're making today, it's because the guys that came from that were ahead of us by 20, 30, 40 years, that got the ball rolling, got things started and worked hard to negotiate benefits, for what we've got. We've lost some of them, we've gained others. The business is changing. You've got to keep your eye, ahead of you and trying to figure out, what do I see coming down the road? What changes? We have layoffs. Well, how can you expect that? And who's going to get laid off and how and why? How is the work going to get done? That type of thing. But it's like you have to accept change. It's the things that I saw changed while I was there. Sometimes I'd never thought, oh, that's, geez, where did that come from? How did that happen? What would lead us to a strike or a lot? In the 38 years I was at NBC, I don't think I was ever involved with a grievance of any type. I don't think I ever got called in on the carpet for something that, hey, Mac, you shouldn't have done that, or got questioned, or someone would once in a while say, hey, I get one of those, okay, but to the guys getting in the business today, you have to realize that, some of the benefits and the wages that you're making and that you're going to make is because a lot of people negotiated and did a lot of hard work to get where we're at, to where you're at today, and trying to hold on to it and stay together. And, the union is as good as the membership that it's got. It's a lot of people have disagreed with some of the things that have happened over the years, but that's what happens. You've got to go along with the program, to a certain extent.
Very much appreciate the advice. And I have taken close to an hour, 40 minutes of your time. I really want to thank you for that. I know prior to this, your nephew, who has just really been a godsend in helping to set this up. I know you're wearing a lav mic. I know you're doing things professionally the right way, the way a broadcast engineer would do it. I'm not going to have you set up that whole studio for a one-time thing. We've talked about this before. This is a continuing thing. We're talking to people on the streets just so we get to know each other. We've had profiles of people who are field photographers kind of talk about who they are, what inspires them. So we build that solidarity, camaraderie amongst each other and get to really know where we're all coming from. What I'd like to offer you, and I'll give you some time to think about it, I'm not going to put you on the spot now, is we're going to be interviewing more people, and I'd love for you to co-host with me whenever you are free to do that. We can interview together, but I think what really the perspectives of different generations, different times in covering something and involving industry is paramount importance. And I do want you to think about that a little. I know we talked about doing a couple of these series, but I'd be honored if you'd consider it. Leave us with a couple of thoughts.
One question, Raza. How much do I get paid for this thing?
You know what? I didn't get the lav mic and everything, so you cut out a little bit.
I will consider it.
That applause thing again.
Yeah. Where is it here? We need some props. We need some union stagehands to, it's like.
You see how I changed the topic? But
okay, yeah, change the topic.
Because, like I said, you always take my calls. We talk maybe once every couple of weeks, and you always give me time and give me advice, and I really appreciate you doing that for everyone else here. You're getting a lot of good comments on that comeback. So this is why we love you, Jimmy Mack. You're always quick to come back.
The next time we're going to have to talk about where these Emmys came from. The fun working with the folks from Saturday Night Live, and working on David Letterman's show when he was still with NBC, and Saturday, Hal Bernstein and myself and John Scott with Mike Ditka at his house the day that they found the Brown's Fried Chicken murders. We were at Mike Ditka's house doing an opening for Saturday Night Live, and that was a very hectic day. But Saturday Night Live, the other work with Jim Belushi and the White Sox and the Blackhawks parades, and hey, people must have liked my work in other cities that they send you an Emmy, say, hey, okay, this is Emmy worthy. So, hey, what the heck?
Okay, I should save this for the next one, but you brought it up and you've intrigued me. You were doing Saturday Night Live. How did that happen in Chicago? And this was the night that Brown's Chicken was down in Palatine? This
was the next day. It had been set up that we would meet with a producer from Second City. And Hal Bernstein, myself, John Scott, okay, you're going to go out to Mike Ditka's house. He got fired from the Chicago Bears. And they've written a script that he's read it. He's agreed to it. It's going to be in his basement. And he's got this beautiful home up north, off of Route 41 up north. And we get to his house, we bring the equipment in, we set it all up, the lighting, everything's just perfect. All he's got to sit down there is sit down and read the script that was, given to him. And it was in cooperation with the super fans, George Wendt, dear Coach Ditka, this is a horrible thing that you getting fired. You should run for Congress. You should run for the Senate. Heck, you should be working at NASA. And here Mike Ditka picks up a phone. He says, hello, NASA? Yeah, it's Ditka, and then he looks into the camera and goes, live from New York, it's Saturday night. Well, there was one shot, you do a practice shot, and Hal, I think, told Johnny Scott, hey, you just got to lower the shotgun just a tiny bit. And Mike Ditka took off on us like we were a bunch of grade school kids in the schoolyard. I don't piss around on my own time. What the heck are you guys? And he's yelling. And I'm thinking to myself, are 50 people going to be watching this? 500, 5,000, 5 million? How many million people are going to be watching the opening season of Saturday Night Live? And this guy is just so sour. And I'm thinking, we couldn't get out of there fast enough. And then I had to go back and coordinate mini cams for the Brown fight coming from out in, where was it? What suburb? I forget the name of the town out northwest there, and from the police department, from the coroner's office, and from the location. And once again, it was a day where the snow was coming down and things weren't moving very fast out there. Palatine. So yeah, that was an interesting day there. My opinion of Mike Ditka changed drastically after that day. It was just sort of like, geez, boy, what, talk about someone who's, well, never mind. I'm not going to get into that business, but it was a very interesting day. Hal and I, and hey folks, it's available on YouTube. Just Google on YouTube, look for Ditka Camera Crew, Saturday Night Live, and you can hear him bitching us out. Oh my God. Pardon me for using that word.
I'm going to check that out right after the show. So, wow. I actually lost my train of thought here, but because now I'm thinking I want to YouTube this. But Jimmy Mack, thank you so much. Leave us with a closing thought. Again, thank you so much for taking this time out of your evening to talk about your just amazing career, both at the O&O, in network, some of the experiences you've had, and the people you've shared it with. And thank you everyone who's watching, who kind of shared memories and prodded stories to basically discuss here. Leave us with some thoughts.
Well, I proved the Dominicans wrong from grade school. Mr. McDonald, you're going to end up in prison. One of those things. No, I proved them wrong. No, I am a success. We weren't criminals. We weren't. But folks, future members of the media and my fellow media members, keep marching forward, keep moving forward. And I've heard it stated on amateur radio, from amateur radio operators from all the way from Australia, England, Sweden, Germany, and South Korea, the big word out there right now is stay healthy and stay wealthy. and I'll leave it at that. It's something to, keep up here. Stay healthy, stay wealthy.
And stay connected. I think that's the most important thing in a situation where we're all kind of separated. It's important for us to come together, share the stories, and be able to still interact with one another. So I'm going to give one final plug out to the fact that we are having an online meeting of the minds tomorrow. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us all to catch up. I know a couple of people who are on this site have already confirmed that they will be joining this. Jimmy Mack, we hope you're going to be on as well. This is
what time?
It's going to be 8:00 tomorrow. I'll send you the Zoom link. It's also on the WMAQ Old Chimers as well. The event list is there. I think it's a great opportunity for us to share these stories with one another. Again, Jimmy Mack, everyone else who's watching, we really do appreciate your time and your helping me along with the questions as well. So we hope to talk to you soon. Jimmy Mack, give some serious thought to there we go. That's my man. Give some serious thought to continuing the co-hosting with me, because we really want to get the stories out there. We want to take this opportunity when we're physically separated to come together and check up on one another.
Fantastic, Raza. I was happy to help you out here tonight.
Oh, fantastic. And we're happy to have you. Stay safe, and we will talk soon. See you later, Jimmy Mack.